Okay, hi. Now in this video we're going to talk about new medicines and developing new treatments. And so first of all, the number one thing you have to realise is that a medicine must be safe. So it must be safe for the patient. Okay, and that doesn't mean that it has to have no side effects. It must have acceptable side effects. That's because it's very difficult for us to produce a drug which has absolutely no side effects. So we must make sure that the side effects are not too severe, that they're acceptable for the patient, and that it's not going to cause the patient any real lasting harm. So sometimes it's down to the patient, obviously, to weigh up the risks and say, yep, I'm willing to take that risk, or I'm willing to put myself in that situation. Okay, of course, the next one, it has to actually do its job. So it has to be effective. Sorry about the awful handwriting here. It has to be effective. It has to actually prevent or cure, prevent/cure the illness. Otherwise, what's the point in taking it? If we're going to take one and it's just, we think it might help, but we're not 100% sure, then it's not enough for us to put that drug onto market. Okay, and lastly, so that's 1, 2. Lastly, it's going to have to be stable. Stable. It's all well and good producing a medicine which does its job and it's relatively safe to use, but what if once you produce it in a lab, it actually disappears after about 10 hours? Well, that's not long enough to package it, send it off to a pharmacy and have a patient be prescribed it and buy it and take it. So it must be stable and it must be able to be stored for a long time. So it must be able to be stored for a long time, and that's so that obviously it's still effective once the patient comes around to using it. Now, whilst it must be stable in the body, whilst it must be stable outside the body, it must be able to be taken into the body and used, and then our body must be able to get rid of it. So stable outside the body and inside the body. It's no good having a drug inside a casing which doesn't open when we swallow the pill, because then obviously we're not actually going to get access to the drug. So it must be able to be used by the body. Okay, now one thing we have to realise that producing a new drug is extremely expensive. So it's very expensive. And this means that some drugs, even if they might work and they might help cure an illness slightly, if they don't really do that great a job, then it's not really worth investing loads of money. They also take a long time to produce. Not just produce, they take a long time to be able to get to the shelves. So a long time to be allowed for public use. And the reasons for that are quite obvious, because we need to be able to test them very rigorously in a lab, and then we also do animal testing, and then we also do human trials before a drug is actually put onto the open market. And so in testing, do that in a different colour. In testing, we're going to start off in a lab, and most drugs will fail at this point because they won't be successful in curing anything when we're using them on cell cultures, tissue cultures in the lab. The next stage is, of course, to trial on animals. Now, of course, you may be asked for the pros and cons of this. It's not always the most humane thing in the world, but of course, we need to weigh up the pros and cons, and the alternative might be to use it on humans. And drugs which pass this animal testing will then be used in clinical trials. And clinical trials are, of course, voluntary human testing. So clinical trials. Now there are various different stages to clinical trials, so we'll have a look at a few of them now. Firstly, low dose is administered to healthy individuals, and this is just to make sure that there are no adverse side effects. So low dose to healthy individuals. Now if we don't detect any side effects, then after this, a higher dose will be given to patients who actually have the illness that we are trying to cure or trying to treat. So patients this time. And then if the drug passes this, and that means that we've seen that it is pretty effective, then we'll have large scale on patients. And this is to try and determine the optimum dose of the drug. So certain drugs will be given, they might be 100 milligrams, 150 milligrams, and they have determined which is the best dose, so which provides the best treatment for the lowest amount of money, and they do that during the clinical trial. Now, one very interesting test which they can also use, which is part of this, is known as a double-blind. So double-blind trial. And in this they are using the drug and a placebo. And a placebo will be the medicine, so a pill or a injection, but it won't actually contain any of the drug whatsoever. Now, some patients are given the real drug and others are given the placebo. And then results are compared at the end. So results compared. And the reason this is called a double-blind trial, and the reason it's so good, is that the patients are not told whether they are given the drug or the placebo. And on top of this, the doctors are not told either. So the doctors and patients not told who is given drug or placebo. And that means that if there is a significant difference in the results, you can see, well, are these patients the ones who are being given the drug? And if they are the patients who have been given the drug, then you can say quite safely, well, the drug has made a difference, and there is no bias from the patient knowing whether they've had the drug or the doctors, so the doctors can't manipulate the results either. Now, very quickly, I want to go through one example which you probably will have heard of, and that is thalidomide. Thalidomide. So this is a very interesting drug. It's had awful side effects on some people. It was originally developed as a sleeping pill. So a sleeping pill to help with people who couldn't sleep. And it was then discovered that it would reduce morning sickness, which is of course something which pregnant mothers will experience. So stops morning sickness. And this is in pregnant women, of course. Now, because the trials had been carried out for sleeping pills, no one had really noticed that it may have side effects on unborn children. So because it had been safe on adults, people just assumed that it would be safe for children. However, this unfortunately was not the case. And it ended up causing, so it caused major deformities in the unborn children. Well, for when they were born, so in the children. So the pregnant mothers took the drug, and without knowing it, their unborn children were being affected. And so when they were born, they had really bad deformities. So they would be missing limbs, or they would have really short limbs. So you would see people with either no arms, no legs, short arms, short legs, and it was just pretty bad. So thalidomide has now been banned to treat morning sickness. And also, it was discovered it could treat leprosy as well, and it was banned for that. Now, interestingly, I'll do this in a different colour. Interestingly enough, it can also be used to treat some cancers. Cancers as well. And as well as some autoimmune diseases. Autoimmune diseases are diseases which affect your immune system and cause your body to either start attacking itself or cause it to stop defending itself. So cancers and autoimmune diseases can be treated with thalidomide, and it has not been banned for this, So it's not been banned for these treatments, but it is very carefully regulated and it cannot be used on anyone who is either pregnant at the time or could become pregnant in the future. So it's almost not used in females at all unless they are above the age in which they can have children. Okay, so that was a brief overview. I hope that has cleared up the process that medicines have to go through before they can make it to market. Now, if you do have any questions, then please do feel free to comment them in the box below or send me a direct email by using the link. But I look forward to seeing you in the next video.